The practice of assigning numbers to letters is called gematria. Here we see how the letters in Enoch's triangle encode the number 72, the number of names of God. When you get deep enough into most religions, you eventually encounter a belief in the sacredness of number. Enoch was supposedly transformed into the archangel Metatron when he was 365 years old, his age being an obvious solar reference. Speaking of solar men being elevated to the divine, let's look at the Capitol building rotunda. This center point of American democracy figured prominently in Dan Brown's The Lost Symbol. Investigative mythologist William Henry has interpreted the significance of the Capitol building as the solemn temple at the heart of America. Looking up through the oculus in the Capitol dome, we see Constantino Brumidi's huge fresco entitled Apotheosis of George Washington. The word apotheosis means elevation of a man into God. George Washington is sitting on a rainbow up in the clouds surrounded by 13 maidens and flanked by the goddesses Liberty and Victory. Henry has dug up what was probably Brumidi's inspiration for depicting Washington riding on a rainbow in front of a stargate. Here is Jesus doing the same. Both are man become God. The fresco at the heart of America clearly elevates Washington into some kind of solar deity. 6 allegorical groupings in a hexagonal arrangement tell stories centered on the ancient gods Mercury, Vulcan, Ceres, Minerva, Neptune, and Columbia. What does all this pagan symbolism have to do with the official history of the United States? Nothing. There are 72 stars surrounding the fresco, recalling the names of God in Jewish mystical tradition. Flora with exposed breast and young America in liberty cap stand in front of Ceres, goddess of agriculture. A sheaf of wheat is often used to depict the goddess of nature, shown here as Virgo, used extensively during the French Revolution. Here the symbols are shown together in Delacroix's Liberty Guiding the People. The goddesses personified on both sides of the Atlantic as nature, reason, liberty, freedom, and Columbia are all esoteric references to the Egyptian goddess Isis. Here's a silver dollar showing liberty with a liberty cap on a pole. This particular coin happens to be worth well over 6 figures today. The seal of the U.S. Senate shows the now familiar red cap as well. To top it off, the goddess Freedom on the outside of the Capitol dome, and recently in the middle of the Capitol Visitor Center, are yet more depictions of you-know-who. The architects of the Capitol are clearly obsessed with the secret worship of Isis. Following the goddess Liberty upward, we see how the entire District of Columbia was originally surveyed by George Washington in 1791. The mile markers are placed ad quadratum, just like the elevation of the House of the Temple built more than a century later. This later organic interruption in the lower portion of the square became Alexandria, Virginia. In the ancient world, Isis had an important temple on the island of Pharos, just outside Alexandria, Egypt. Pharos was the location of the Lighthouse of Alexandria, wonder of the ancient world. The light that shone from it was the Stella Maris, Star of the Sea, one of the many epithets for Isis. The highest point in Alexandria, Virginia, has a replica of the ancient lighthouse, in the form of the George Washington Masonic National Memorial. George Washington and many of the founding fathers were, of course, well-known Freemasons. Pay special attention to the 3 cubes forming the body of the lighthouse. We'll see this symbolism again in London, and finally decode it in Paris. How is it that we keep finding secret connections to Isis and ancient Egypt in a country that has no ostensible reason to make this symbolic linkage? Believe it or not, Pennsylvania Avenue is astronomically oriented to the heliacal rising of Sirius. The ancient Egyptians based their calendar on this phenomenon. which is the day when ISIS's star, Sirius, is visible on the horizon just before sunrise. From the White House in early August, Sirius is visible a few minutes before sunrise, directly behind the Capitol building. If you overlay a pair of pentagrams over the Capitol building, a couple of interesting things occur. These edges follow Pennsylvania and Maryland avenues, and RFK Stadium from 1961 is framed perfectly in the crook of the opposing pentagram. I noticed 4 radiating streets above and below the Capitol building. Then it clicked with the pentagrams, and I see what is actually depicted here is the Templar cross. Can there now be any doubt who is behind the program of symbolism in DC? David Oveson's groundbreaking book, The Secret Architecture of Our Nation's Capital, reveals that DC has more zodiacs than any city in the world, concentrated in what is called the Federal Triangle. The Federal Triangle contains many important governmental structures, including the National Archives, the National Post Office, the Departments of Justice and Commerce, and so on. Most importantly, Oveson shows how these Federal Triangle zodiacs draw attention to one constellation in particular, Virgo. Virgo the Virgin is an esoteric representation of Isis. 18th century Masonic French astronomer Jérôme Lalande wrote, "The Virgin is consecrated to Isis, just as Leo is consecrated to her husband Osiris." So Isis is linked with the Federal Triangle, and Osiris with the Capitol building. The Virgin's right hand points to the White House, but her left hand is actually on the Washington Monument. This is very interesting to those who know the Isis story. Could Isis be holding Osiris's golden phallus in the form of the Washington Monument?